Hi everyone. In this video, I'm going to show you how to do plan details in Rhino 8 and also in Adobe Illustrator. So in the previous video, I showed you how to do architectural floor plans at a detailed level, but this one's going to be an actual plan detail, like a 2-inch or a 3-inch to 1-foot detail. So it's going to be very up close on an actual wall assembly system for architectural floor plans, but again, at a very detailed view. And so the previous video focused a little bit more on the Illustrator side, but on this video, I'm going to show you both how to do it completely in Rhino and completely in Adobe Illustrator so that you get results like what you see on the screen here. And I'll also just go into a little bit of the building science of this. I don't want to go too much into the building science, but just generally how this wall assembly is working in terms of insulation and drainage planes, vapor profiles. But in general, video is more so for just how to create the drawing. So let's just go ahead and get started. Okay, so what you see here is what we're going to use as our plan detail example. This is just a basic rain screen exterior insulation assembly system. So what you have here working from the inside to the out is on the interior, you have some type of gypsum or sheathing with some type of permeable paint, like permeable latex paint. And then you're going to have your framing, whether it's wood stud or metal framing. We're going to have cavity insulation in here, but I'll just do a hatch for that. And then you're going to have your sheathing. Let me just zoom in a little bit more. Right? And then you're going to have your drainage plane with the membrane. We'll just call it the weather barrier. You know, the vapor barrier, the air barrier. We'll just call it the membrane, the weather membrane. And then you're going to have your exterior rigid insulation, which is going to vary depending on region. And then you're going to have your battens, right? So these are like your vertical and horizontal battens for the actual final cladding, which goes here. And so this almost, this is a typical rain screen system where you have some type of airspace between. And at the end of the video, I'll go into just a little bit more detail about this system. You know, building science can get a little bit not controversial, but it's just a touchy topic because there's a lot of opinions about building science, whether it's from the supplier, like the installation supplier might give you a typical detail, whereas a building scientist might tell you this is the preferred method in the climatic region. So it just depends on who you're asking. But in general, this is one acceptable form of an assembly system in like all climatic regions. It just depends on the thickness of the insulation and where you place your vapor profile or your drainage plane. But again, I'll go into detail about this at the end of the video if people are interested about this. So one thing to understand is that you need to have a very clean Rhino model, right? So if you look at my layers, I have a very organized layer. So that's number one. And everything in here is, in solid geometry form. And the reason for this is that when you make 2D, it's going to make the drawing easier to export or to differentiate the overlapping lines when you make 2D if you have a clean layered system. Okay, so that's very important. That needs to be emphasized. You need to have a clean layering system so that when you make 2D, it's easy to work with when you do your line weights and drawings. All right. So the first thing you're going to do is make a clipping plane, right? So I have a clipping plane right here that's already active right here, So if I click on this right here and you go to your properties, you want to activate it in the views that you want to make. So I have it in my perspective view, which I'm calling V3. And then you definitely want to activate in your top view, okay? And again, just to reiterate, this is just a portion of a model that I already have. So when I transition over to the next segment, you're going to see something that's like way more detailed than this. I just have this here because it's just faster to make 2D. But I just don't want you to be, thrown off when you see the next segment of this video. So once you have your clipping plane and you activate the views you want to make 2D, what I'll do is you just want to go ahead and just select everything, right? And then I'm going to go to my top view, right? And I'm just type in make 2D. And then you're going to get these options, right? So you definitely want your view, all right? And you want your maintain source layers. This is very important because it's going to keep all of the layers attributed to what you're cutting. And then tangent edges for curved geometry, clipping plane intersections, very important. Viewport rectangle, group output. So all of these are very important to have. I mean, group output's optional. Viewport rectangle is very helpful. It'll maintain the viewport of this, like the proportion of this, if you ever want to take it into another program. You understand the scale and proportionality. Clipping plane intersection is obvious. You want to make 2D what the clipping plane is cutting. Very important. And then you just click OK, and it's going to pop up in your 0, point. And I'm just typing Z as zoom selected to go to the actual make 2D, which is right here. You see? So this is the make 2D right here. And I have it selected right now. And so let me just go ahead and hide my ground plane for a second. So if I just type in unlock, let me just hide this. So you see everything here is in its own layers, okay? This is very important. So if you go to your layers segment, right, you're gonna have your make 2D over here, and you're gonna have things, under curves, clip and plane intersections, tangents, okay? So it's really important to understand that clip and plane intersections, this is everything that's gonna be cut, all right? So that means you know right away, everything under this layer is a cut layer. Everything under here is a cut, so it's always gonna have a little bit darker line compared to your curves. This is basically gonna be your lightest, right? Because these are just all surfaces. You're not cutting through these. But then here, this is everything that's cut. So when you do your line weights, which is gonna be all the way over here, right? You're gonna set all of your line weights here, and I'll show you in the next segment, right? You know what's gonna be heavier than the other layers. Like these are gonna be all light. These are gonna be a little bit heavier. These are all cuts. And again, I'm gonna go into detail about this in the other segment. Okay, cool. So I'm going to transition over to now how to start creating line weights and how to set this up in Rhino. Just keep in mind that when I transition over, you're going to see something way more detailed with like way more walls and trees because I put a bunch of blocks in there and I'll show you where I got all that stuff as well. Okay. Okay, so here we are with the original model that I had from before. Again, like I said, it's going to be more detailed because this is taken from my original 3D model. I just didn't want to make 2D because it would take longer. But here it is with everything that's cut, and I added a lot of blocks in here. So I have all of these blocks that you see here for vegetation and people and furniture, and I got it from this website right here. Let me show you too. So I go to this website, it's called cadblocks.net, and they have just a lot of different types of blocks that you can use. This is everything's from this website. My vegetation and my people and the equipment, I use it all from this website. It's very helpful and it's for free. And then another website I use that it's helpful is the CAD hatches, right? You download these and they become zip files, and then they're .pat files, and you can import those into Rhino. And I'll show you how to do that as well. But in general, everything you see in my plan, right? Everything you see in here, this is all from that CAD blocks website, and any hatches you see is going to be imported in from that website as well. And I'll show you how to do all that stuff. Now, the first thing that you need to do is you need to know how to set your scale, okay? So in the previous video, we did the entire floor plan, right? In this video, we're going to do like the corner detail, right? Maybe like this much, okay? So it's really important to understand what scale you're working with, because once you understand that, then you know, okay, this is the size of my line weights, how thick lines should be. So the first thing you want to determine is how big you want your drawing to be, okay? And like how big on a sheet. So let's just exaggerate here, and let's just say that maybe we want to have like this like really big corner detail that you want to show off. So let's say it's like on like a 24 by 36, or even like we'll stick to a 24 by 36 just because it's an easy number, but you don't have to do that. So we'll just do a 24 by 36, right? So the first thing that I'll do is I'll do a rectangle, right? I'll do the center option, and I'll just do 2 feet by 3 feet. This is in portrait, which is okay. I'll just rotate it with the gumball. And then I'll scale this up by a scale factor, right? So let's say that I want to do for the time being a 3-inch detail, like 3-inch equals 1 foot. So a 3-inch detail, the scale factor of that is going to be 4, okay? So if I type in scale, right, and enter it, pick a point, let's do a scale factor of 4, okay? And so this is where it'd be. I already have one, but it's okay. I'll just delete it. I'm going to move this to page border. Okay, just so you understand about scale factors, right? So like if something is 1/8 scale, the scale factor is going to be 96. If something is a quarter scale, the scale factor is going to be 48. So you're basically just taking the denominator and you're either dividing it or multiplying it by 12, okay? So if something is 3-inch scale, right, the scale factor is going to be 4. Something is 6-inch scale, right, the scale factor is going to be 2. So it's important to understand these scale factors because it becomes very helpful when you are dealing with the layout space and your dimension styles. All right. So once you have this determined, you can create a new layout. All right. So you can create a new layout. So once you create a new layout, you can put this drawing, and this becomes like a really great reference of aligning your layout with your drawing. Okay. So we'll just create like a new layout, right? And you can pick, so we'll do, arc D 24 by 36 landscape. You can do anything you want. You can do any size. You can do a custom, like if you want it to be square, you can do that, anything. I'm just doing 24 by 36 because it's the easiest. So we'll just do okay. So the first thing that we're going to do is we're going to add a detail, which is basically like a viewport. So you can either type in the command called detail, right? You can add a detail, or you can go right here and click on Add Detail, again, which is like a viewport. So I'll go from this corner to this corner, okay? Like that, there you go. So if you see here, this is a border for 24 by 36 at like a 1/2 inch scale, right? But if you notice here, this is the small border I made for a 3-inch scale drawing. So if I double click on here and I go to properties, you see how I have this right here, the scale layout, 1 inch equals a foot, right? I can, for example, type in 3, right? And then 1, right? So now this is 3 inches equals a foot, and I can pan like that. You see? And so do you see how this now lines up with this? So what I'll do is, let me find an easy point. I'll use this top left corner. This is why I have this, so I can use it as a reference to perfectly line up with my drawing. That's why. Okay? So I can click outside here. I'm going to click on my little detail, the detail viewport rectangle, and you can move the corner. So I can go here, take the gumball, move it to this corner right there, type in move this to that corner up there. Like that. And then I can take the other and move that right there. There you go. And so here's in reality, I feel like this is too much. I'm showing too much here. You don't need to show because it's very redundant. When you do a detail, you only need to show just the corner, right? I could have made like little squares, but like this is a lot of thing I don't need, but we can use this for like compositional purposes, which I'll show you at the end of the video, like how we can lay out labels and graphics and things like that, okay? But if you see here, this is the actual detail. This is the scale I want to be working with. So if I click on my detail, you see right here, it's giving me 1 inch equals basically, this is the scale factor. You can type it in the regular scale, so don't forget that. Like you can type in inches, 3 inches, feet, 1. But don't type in the actual, just type in 3 and 1, okay? Don't type in the inch symbol or the foot symbol. Just type in 3, 1, and then it'll automatically convert it for you, okay? So that's set. Now, the other things I want to talk to you about, which is very important, are the line weights, the line types, the dimension styles, and how I'm importing hatches, okay? So number one, let's just look at the line weights, okay? So if I go to my layers, right, it's really important to understand that when I set my line weights and my line colors, you're not using the layer color. You're going to be using the actual print color over here, okay? So if you notice, a lot of things here are like in black and grays, okay? So that's one important thing to understand. So if we zoom in here, you wanna make sure in your top left, you have print preview, so it'll do things live for you, all right? So for example, if I go on my facade, I have the facade clipping plane cut, right? So facade, right? If I go here, right, I can change this. So right now it's 0.3, that's still very light. Like we can make this much heavier, maybe like double, like even 0.7. Let's do okay. You see? And then we can even go, you just don't want it to look too clumsy. And you can go in between these. You don't have to click these. You can go over here and do like, 0.75 if you wanted to, right? So you can do it like that. And then the same thing here. Let's see what else we have here. So flashing, we'll leave that alone. I just do all the major obvious elements like my installation, my structural framing, my battens and things like that. So if I go here, battens, like that, that's nice. And then installation, have it as exterior. But you see how it's helpful to have these layers like that? But you get the idea of what I'm doing here, And then I think that the structural framing needs to be much heavier as well. So if you do structural framing, you see right there. Also, this might be heavier, like 0.7 or 0.8, excuse me, I changed the color. Let me just zoom out to see how that feels. I mean, we can make this, honestly, even a tad bit darker for all of them. I can just click on these at the same time. And let me change it to like 0.9 so that they can just pop more. Yeah. So I might fast forward through this just so that I can set up more line weights, but I just want you to understand that's what I'm doing basically. So I finished assigning line weights and line types. If you see here, If you move to the side, you can see all of the line types and line weights that I've assigned. Most of them are continuous lines. There's only one dash line, and that's the membrane that you see here. I'm using it right here. You see this membrane? That if you go here, I have a membrane layer right there. I made it a hidden line. And I just used the default hidden line. Okay, so next I want to show you how to import line types and also annotation styles and hatches. So if you type in options, the first thing I want to show you is to do line types. So if you go to line types, right? If you're missing lines, just click on this like reset button here and it'll bring in all of the lines that you didn't have before, like the default lines. That's important, right? So if you don't see your hidden or your dashed, just click this and this will reset the defaults to the original. Now, annotation styles. It's important to understand that when you create annotation styles, you have to do it to like the scale factor, okay? But when you're doing it in Rhino, so the first thing you're going to do is you're going to do a new one, right? Or you can make a copy of a standard. So if you do new, you'll pick a standard like from something you've already worked with, or a complete brand new one if you haven't started one from scratch. So if you do one from scratch, I typically like to do like foot inch architectural, okay? And then you click OK, and then you can modify it. So let me just go back into here and just modify this one. Let me just click on edit. Now for model space scale, right? So let's say like you're doing a 1/4 inch scale, it's going to be model space will be 4, not the scale factor. Okay, it's going to be 4 because our model space is in feet and our layout space is in inches. It's not, so you need to watch with the scale factor of that. It's a little confusing, but just keep that in mind. So if it's an 1/8 scale, it's going to be an 8. If it's half scale, it's going to be 2. Okay. So just remember that it's going to basically be the denominator. And then if it's like a big number, like 3 inches, right, it'll be like 3 divided by 12, right, which will be like 0.25. You get what I'm saying? So the model space scale for your annotation style is going to be based off of the denominator of the scale, not the scale factor. So just keep that in mind. And then that will just go ahead and start modifying all of your dimension styles. Like, for example, your lines and like your arrows, your arrowheads. Like I like to do dots, for example, and I change the size sometimes. Okay, so the ones that I change mostly are the arrowheads and then the units. If I go down here, like length units, like the tolerance, if I want to round it off to an inch or half an inch or 1/4 inch, just to keep clean numbers. That's what I typically modify. All right, so that's really important to understand. The other important thing about annotation styles is that when you have a detail window or like a viewport, it's gonna automatically scale up the scale factor of the annotation style. So like if I, for example, let me just show you what I mean. So right now we're in paper space, or I guess layout space, right? If I go back to model space by double clicking on here or going down in this tab, right? Let me just show you. See, if I go here and I click on this, right, and I change my dimension style to like half, see how big it is right here? If I go back to my layout space, it doesn't matter. It's gonna scale it by the actual scale factor of this window here. That's what it's going to do. Okay? That's very important to understand when you're doing this. Now, if I go back to options and do my hatches, if I go to hatch, right here, I have all these hatches here. You can just do import hatch, and you just have to import a .pat file. So if I go back to that website, right here, you find like a hatch you like, wood hatch. You click on any of these, and it'll download a zip. Just extract that zip and get the .pat, and you can import multiple .pat files in the newest version of Rhino 8. From before in the older versions, you would need to like download a script, but in Rhino 8, you can import multiple hatches now, which is really helpful. But yeah, this is where I get all my hatches. So we've done importing line types and doing hatches and doing annotation styles. So I just want to quickly just go over this real fast to show you the line weights, and then we'll do actual hatches on here. And this will be how you do everything in Rhino, like everything you do in Rhino, and I'll show you just like the PDF export. At the end of the video, I'm going to show you like how I lay this out, like for a design board, for like a design presentation, or annotation styles when I label things for like a final board. But this is just like the final drawing if you want to take it straight from Rhino. Don't forget, I'm going to show you the Illustrator version where I just export the actual model space to Illustrator. So I'll show that to you in a later segment. But here, I just want to show you what's going on. Like, if you notice here, for example, I have like this nice thick outline around my window frame, right? And then if you see, I kind of exaggerate the gap of the actual window frame to the jamb. And in reality, I would probably add like another like nailing block underneath this. But some people will nail it directly onto there if they wanted to. But yeah, you would actually nail another nailing block on here. I also do this gap because I want to show how the weather barrier will wrap around. Okay? Because you want this to be like a perfect seal. And then if I zoom in more, this is like your sealant and your backer rod, right? So like no water can drip in. And then this is like my flashing. But I'm like zoomed in a lot. It's a little too much. This is like the actual scale I would want to like read the drawing at, right? Maybe like this. This is like the actual scale I'll be reading the drawing at, which is very detailed. Okay. And so what I'm going to do next now is I'm going to show you how I hatch things on here. Okay. There's a lot of ways of hatching in Rhino, but this is where you're going to see why working on Illustrator is probably nicer. There's pros and cons of working in Rhino and working in Illustrator. I'm going to show you the pros and cons of working in both, and at the end just give you input. So I'm going to show you how to hatch, and there's a couple different ways of hatching in Rhino. So one way I'm going to show you is, let's say you have a lot of closed elements here, like my facade elements. I'm going to type in hatch, and I'm going to do boundary yes, and then I'm going to just select my facade elements like this, right, like that. Then I'm going to press enter, and then combine regions I'm going to do no, but all regions I'm going to click on that. There you go. And so what that's going to do is it's going to basically say, okay, all of these regions here, I want those regions to be a hatch. And I can press enter. So it's gonna give me all your hatch. I have this wood hatch that I'm doing, right? So I'll use that and I'll do okay. All right, so you see this? And I'm gonna change the rotation. Also, if you go in here, you can change, maybe you don't like this hatch type. I want like the different type of, like, I want this wood grain instead, or like this wood grain instead. You see? So you can pick whatever wood style that you want, or any hatch style that you want. It doesn't really matter. It's up to you. So that's important thing to understand, that don't worry if you don't select the right hatch on that dialog, you can always go back in the properties and change it. Okay? And the other thing that I want to do is I want to change the rotation, but I just want to show you that's one way of hatching, okay? The other way of hatching is if I do like hatch, right? And I can do select curves, right? I can do that, enter. I can click inside the region to keep, so I can click like inside of here, right? I want to keep that and press enter, and it'll hatch it like that as well. You get the same dialog, okay? So there's a lot of ways of hatching. So I'm going to go ahead and just hatch everything that I need to hatch in here, my bad insulation, my rigid insulation, and then we'll just go in, and then also the actual footprint here, I want to hatch that as well. So I'm going to just fast forward through this and I'll transition over once I have everything hatched out. So one thing that I want to mention is that when I'm hatching these elements, I'm grouping them after I hatch them. So after I hatch these, I group them together. After I hatch these, I group these together. Okay? And don't be fooled by this hatch element here, right? Because when I'm in my paper space, you see how the scale is a little bit different because I'm in a different scale, that's why. I can match the scale factor, but if you're working with multiple drawing scales, like you're working with a floor plan and you're working with a detail, the drawing scale is going to be different. So it's better just to have like a separate file, just to keep them completely separate if you're going to do it in Rhino. In Illustrator, will be the same thing. You'll have a completely separate file, but I'll talk about that on the Illustrator side of things. So if you see here, I have all the major elements hashed. I still got to hatch the cavity insulation here, and I want to hatch the ground plane and the outside plane here. So I'm still going to fast forward, but I just want to mention this idea of grouping, and I just want to show you how I hatch things by region. So this is a good example of hatching by region. If I do hatch, right, boundary, I want my boundary to be yes, and let's say I want to just select. Let me deselect this. Definitely deselect that, right? Press enter. I can click in the areas that I want. So like I want to hatch in here, and in here and here. I'm just doing an example like that and like that, right? And I can press enter, right? And then I can just change it to like bat insulation. I think it's like under B. Here it is, bat insulation, right? And I can change the scale of this, maybe, I don't know, change the scale of 1. And then I can even change the base point. I can change the base point, right? If I go here, I can click here and be like, I want the hash to start right here, like that, right? And we'll do okay. I know it looks weird here. The best way is to go to your actual layout space to see how it looks. And then, I would actually go ahead and just like, for example, group these, right? But I would do to everything. I just did this for an example. So I would go in here. So if I go back to my layout space here, right, let me just click outside. You see how it looks different on layout space because the scale factor is different. So if I double click in here, right, if I click here, I want to change the scale of this, right? It needs to be a little bit bigger, maybe like 1.25. Even bigger. Let's try 1.5. Yeah, then I want to change the base point. So if I click here, I want it to like start at the bottom, right? Let me do it again. Let me do it from the top this time to see. There you go. But I need maybe like 1.4, 1.3. Okay, that's not bad. Like that. And this one I think I messed up on. I can just do match properties. There you go, like that. See? And I can double click to go back like that, you see? I also got to do the sheathing hatch. That's why I wanted to fast forward. There's a lot of hatching here. But I just want to give you an example how I hatch things. So yeah, I'm going to transition over and just finish all the hatches and I'll show you the final export. Okay, so I just finished hatching everything. And if we zoom in here, you'll sort of see all the hierarchy of the hatching, right? So we have our finished cladding over here, right? And then we have our batten. And this is the vertical batten versus the horizontal batten. This is the rigid insulation. This is your membrane. This is the sheathing. This is the cladding. This is your cavity insulation. This is the interior finish. And then this is just the surface hatch of the ground and, also hatching this. And don't be fooled. It's not going to look this dark. It's going to be much lighter than this, okay? So that's one important thing to keep into consideration. I want to just show you another thing that's important is that you see I get like this thick outline around the window frame. I just want to show you quickly how I do that. So if I go back to my top view here, right? So let's say you have like a block, right? And you don't want to make it a heavy cut. So we'll do curve Boolean and delete input no, combine regions, it doesn't matter because we're just doing one region. Output curve, simplify curves, yes, and you'll just select this whole thing here, right? And so I'll click, and you see how it gives me an outline? You can just press enter. And so you see it gives me this like outline right here that I can use, and it becomes a polyline. And you can put that around the actual block and make this like a nice thick line. Okay, so that's one thing important to understand. If I go back to my layout, there are things that you can lock your viewport. So if you click on your viewport, your detail view, you can lock the viewport so that when you double click inside the model space, it won't take you out of the frame. And you can modify things inside of here. Okay. So again, this is how it looks like in the layout view, but when you print it with the print settings, it'll be much lighter. So if I do Control P for print, right? I'm gonna do, you can do Rhino PDF, high output, right? Vector for sure, print color, which means it's gonna print the actual colors that you assign to it, right? And then viewport and scale, you can do this one, whichever sheet it is. And you can do scale to, it doesn't matter because it is already scale to fit anyway, so it doesn't matter. You can do 1-to-1 or scale to fit. It makes no difference. And then if you scroll down here, I want to do match pattern definition. That's very important. Okay. So that's going to match everything that is on the actual, it's going to match everything that's like assigned to your layers. And then everything else is pretty much fine. You don't have to have anything else checked. But this is really important. Match pattern definition means that it's going to match literally your line weights of what's actually on there. So that's very important, okay? Like what settings you put on your layers. And just do print and just save it as a PDF wherever you like. So this is the final export from Rhino. Doing all the Lineweights in Rhino, all the hatches are in Rhino. Everything's in Rhino. I haven't taken this to Illustrator one bit. I'm going to show you how I would lay this out on InDesign and have text, but I just want to show you this is like the actual final drawing aspect from Rhino. See, so the line weights are very strong, hatches are very strong, everything pops the way you want it to pop, right? And I think when you add labels to this, it'll look really nice. But this looks fantastic. Even if I zoom in, you'll see, you know. Things read well. Everything reads nicely. Again, this is your cladding finish. This is your battens, right? Horizontal batten, vertical batten, rigid insulation, membrane layer, sheathing, cavity insulation with the framing, and then interior finish. At the end of this video, I'll talk about, dew points and condensation in drainage planes and climate conditions if you're interested. And so now I want to show you how it looks like when I lay this out on InDesign. So in this example here, this is a 24 by 36 board, and I have the full plan on the left, and then I have that plan detail that we were working on. And so this really hasn't been scaled that much. It's still pretty much the same scale, maybe just like 1% smaller. I just cropped it off heavily because it was very long. So I cropped it off. If you notice here, I'm using this extra space to place labels. And it looks really nice when you use part of the drawing to overlay labels or other elements for annotations and things like that. And so I'm going to show you the final export of this. This is just to save memory on InDesign. But keep in mind, again, this is the Rhino version. So what you see on the right is the Rhino version, okay? So I'm going to just transition over and show you when I export this either as a high quality PDF or as a high quality JPEG or PNG. It's your choice. So what we're looking at here is the final export that you just saw in InDesign. Okay, so on the right, again, this is what we were working on in Rhino. There's nothing else. I didn't do anything on Illustrator for this file. This is all straight out of Rhino, and I just took it and dropped it into InDesign. So this is how it's going to look when you take it in from Rhino. The one on your left, again, this is from the previous video that you watched about creating plans. This is the one that we did in Illustrator. But even if in Rhino, it'll be the same. But again, this is the one that we did in Illustrator. The one on the right, this is purely from Rhino. Okay, so don't forget, I'm going to transition over to another segment where I show you how to do everything from Illustrator, and we'll do a comparison side by side. But again, this is, I think, above good. I just don't like the hatches. I don't like the ground hatches, but all of the other hatches are perfectly fine. I like the hatches to be a little more organic. That's my only critique. I could have made like the cavity hatches a little bit darker for sure. You know, but other than that, I think this is wonderful. And this is what I was talking about, overlaying your labels on your details. And this is like a great combination to have, right? A plan next to a plan detail, because then it really ties the story together, or like a plan detail next to like a rendering of that same location. And so if I zoom in here, right? Like if I zoom in, like it's pretty, I can't pan like this. You see? This is I just don't like how it reads the hatches on from Rhino. That's my only critique of like the more organic hatches, but these hatches are absolutely fine. And you're seeing a lot of detail here, right? You're seeing a lot of detail. You're seeing the different assembly systems of the facade and the battens and the rigid insulation and the membrane and the sheathing and the cavity with the framing and then the interior finish, right? Even on the window frame, if I zoom in even more, right? I'm at 125% right now. You see? It reads very well. I'm zooming 125%. Annotations look great. I could label the annotations like 3-foot inch daylight opening, right? 4-inch facade finish width. So you can do more labels just to help with the annotations for like graphic layout. But this looks great. And obviously this is what we did last time, and this looks fantastic. Zoomed in as well. Let me just zoom out some more. So I'm gonna transition over now, and I'm gonna show you how to do this exact same plan detail in Illustrator, okay? So for the Illustrator method, we're going to take what's in the model space, the make 2D that's in the model space, and we're going to take that to Illustrator. And just keep in mind that we want to also take these hatches. I don't want to rehatch this in Illustrator if these hatches look fine in Rhino already. And I'll show you how to recreate the hatches if you want to, okay? But I want to keep these wall assembly hatches, and the only hatches I'm going to reproduce are the ground hatches. Okay, so we're going to take everything else with us. We don't need to export the entire drawing. We just want this bottom right drawing. So we're going to do a rectangle, and we'll do the center option, and we'll just do, 2 feet by 3 feet, 24 by 36. Let me just rotate it 90, right? And then let me scale it by the scale factor. Again, if it's 3-inch, it'll be a scale factor of 4, right? And let me just move it something like this. And let me just take some hatches with me, okay? And I'll put them in like these little square swatches. So I'll do a rectangle, right? I'll hold shift to make it square, and I'll do hatch, and I'll just select this, press enter. I'll select any random hatch for now, and I'll do match properties, right? And I'll select this with that. So I want to take that one. Let me just change the scale of this real fast. Change it to like a scale of 1, like that. So we'll take this hatch with us, and then I'm going to duplicate this. Do match properties again. I want to modify this. Let me take this one with us as well. Okay. right? And then I'm just going to hold Alt, drag this down, match properties. Let me take the insulation hatch. I think that's good enough. I don't need any other hatches. I can take the concrete hatch if I wanted to. I take that. If I just click on this right here, I can just change this and find the concrete hatch. It should be in alphabetical order. Right there, concrete. Let me just change the scale. Like that. Great. So we'll take these with us to Illustrator as well. Now, I'm just going to select this, right? I don't want to go too much, but it's okay. Don't worry about if it goes beyond the extents. It's not a big deal. So I'm going to take this, right? I want all of this here. Don't worry about this because I'll show you how to scale it properly in Illustrator. And I'm going to select export. And I'm going to do an Illustrator file. And I'm just going to call this plan detail new. And there's some settings, okay? We'll just do snapshot of current view. I don't want to do it to an actual scale. You can do it to a scale, but then you have to make sure that your model is at the 0, 0 point. If it's not at the 0, 0 point, it's going to fly off the artboard in Illustrator and you'll never be able to locate it or even use it. So I just do snapshot of current view and I rescale in Illustrator. Color space, you know, if you're going to print it out, CMYK. If it's just on presentation, digital, you can do RGB. It's not that big of a deal because majority of this is black and white anyway. What's really important is uncheck hatches export as solids. You don't want that checked. You want that just to be as is, because if you keep it checked, it's going to make everything solid for your hatches. We don't want that. We want to keep the patterns. And then I would also do always, or excuse me, order layers. Okay, that's really important. Then you just press OK, and you're good. Okay, so this is the export from Rhino, and we have it opened up in Illustrator. Once you have it opened up, you're going to probably get a dialog about legacy text if you have text from Rhino, so like dimensions or any type of text object. And so you want to go ahead and update that because then it makes the text editable in Illustrator, which is very helpful. All right, so then the next thing we're going to do is we're actually going to go and just scale this to the artboard. So just make sure you have the correct artboard size, right? So I have a 24 by 36. You can edit it by doing over here. You can just edit the artboard size by clicking over here, or you can just go to File, Document, Setup, and also edit it from there as well. What I want to do is actually get the eraser tool. I just don't like how this is like extending so far beyond, and it's just really quick. If you just do use the eraser tool right here and hold Shift, you can just like, you know, maybe I want to just get rid of that over here. Maybe I don't want this right there, right? And then I can just go ahead and like delete this. I don't want this anymore, right? And over here as well, just press A. I can just delete these, right? It's very helpful, very quick. Also, you know, again, we're not even going to use the full extent of this detail, just maybe like 2/3 of it, right? So we don't need the far left of this detail as much, right? So I'm going to go in here, and now the way we can scale this up is a couple ways. You can do it like, you know, graphically if you wanted to. You can just take the top left corner, right, and just line it up with the artboard and scale it down. So like you can select, for example, the top, you can select this, right? And then on the transform tool, make sure your anchor is on the top left and scale it visually by that. I like to use math, like basic math. So what I'll do is like I'll just press A, select this, and do Control C and Control V, and just get the length of this or the height of this. And so this is around what, 2.409. So if you do 24 inches over 2.409, that's going to give you the scale factor, right? So if I just type in 24 inches over 2.40999, I get 9.95891. So I just want to round to like the second decimal place. So the scale factor of this is going to be a really big number, right? It's going to be 995. Let me select it. So I'll just do object, transform. I can right scale. I can also right click, and I'll do 995.891. Okay, that's the basic scale factor of this. Just press enter. There you go. So if I zoom out, you see this is my artboard right here, and then this is this guy right here. You see, it like lines up perfectly with the artboard, and we're good. You see, it's the exact same size as the artboard. So this is exactly what we want. All right. I mean, I don't even need this right here, to be honest. Like you can get rid of a lot of this stuff here. You don't need this stuff. Like, but again, this is gonna be cropped off anyway. I'm not worried about it. So once we have this set, I actually want to go to my layers and turn off my hatches just for now. And I want to select, do Control A, select everything, and just give everything like a line weight of like 0.15 or something like that, you know? Just give it a very light line weight so you can just start to see things. And then just turn this back on. So here we go. So now things are nice and light. And then we're going to start making things, you can start giving things thicknesses, right? And so what I like to do for my fills actually is I like to make my fills a stroke. So if I select this over here, it'll select all of my hatches. If you notice, it has like a fill color to it. I don't want to give it a fill color. I actually just want to give it a stroke value instead of a fill. So I'm going to get rid of the fill, right? And I'm just going to make it 0.1. You don't have to do that, but I like to do that. Okay, you can keep it as a fill, but I just like to keep it as a color. I'll keep it a gray for now. Okay. So now all of these hatches are going to be an actual stroke. You see, this is an actual stroke now. Let me just make sure I change the line weight because it says 1. I'm going to do 0.1. There you go. So it's like really light. And we'll go back and edit it and see how it looks. It's just a preference. You can keep it as a fill if you like to. So that's the first thing. Now we can start to pick off all of the cuts by looking at the clip and plane intersection, or I can just select it here. So like for example, this is my facade, for example. I know that's going to be a heavy line. I know this is going to be a heavy line, which is the vertical batten. The insulation is going to be a heavy line. And I'll just start with that. And so if I go over here, right, and I can just hold shift and select these. So this, and this. And I just want to give it like a line weight, maybe like a line weight of 3. So it's like really thick, you see? So it's gonna make all of them. You see that? When you click this on the right side, it makes all of them thick, right? That's really important to understand when you're doing line weights. And so I'll just start doing this for everything, but just in terms of having hierarchy of what's going to be heavy, what's going to be light. So clearly everything that's like a big cut is going to be the heaviest line. A small cut is also going to be dark, but not as thick. So for example, the interior finish, you see how it's like really close together. So I'll just click here. It's not going to be a 3. Maybe it'll be like a 2 or 1.5. We'll see how it looks. You see, like you don't want it to be too close together, but that looks nice. And also here the sheathing, right? So I click here again. I'll just find the sheathing over here. I'll probably make that like a 2.5. All right, nice. You can't see it because it's white, but let me go ahead and make everything black. Let me turn off the hatch layer for now. Let me turn off dims and select everything, and let me make everything a black. There we go. So now we can see things much more clearly. Let me turn the hatch back on. Turn this back on. So you see now you can read the hierarchy of read the hierarchy of the cuts right now, right? Let me go. I don't know why the sheathing didn't change. Let me try it again. Change that to 2.5. There you go. Yeah, that reads nicely. I also want to make my lines, the corners, squared off. So you see here, this is kind of like architecturally pedantic, but you see how it kind of rounds off the corners? I don't like that because it's like too diagrammatic. I want it to be sharp. So I just do Control A, right? And then if I go to my stroke, over here, my stroke options, I want to cap it off squared, not rounded. And then the corners should be squared off as well. Okay? So you see now it's sharp. It's a little picky, but I just don't like it like that. So we have this like this. This is looking great, to be honest. And then so what I'm gonna just basically go through this and just do my line weights for everything. So and I'll recap and just show you what I made lighter or what I made darker. So I'm gonna fast forward through this. Okay, so I went ahead and I finished my line weights. I just want to recap something. So in the previous video when I was showing you how to do floor plans, if you remember, I made some of the hatches and some of the assets like a dark gray, not a full black. But and then in this instance, I want to make everything a black because it's very up close and very large scale. You want everything to have the same color, and the hierarchy is still going to read because of the difference of line weights. If you make things gray, it's going to read very, very light. So when you work in very large scale details, I would recommend making everything black, but then play around with the line weights. When I did my floor plan, that's at a 1/2 inch scale, even a 1/4 scale. It's okay to have some grays in there because you're going to have a lot of hierarchy in terms of color and line weights. But here, when you're working on details that are very large, your hierarchy is really going to be through the line weights, not really through color. Because, like, for example, this is like a 2.5 or a 3, right? So, like, I went ahead and I just looked at some things. Like, I made this a 2.5 instead of a 3, and I made some things thinner. But it's good just to test things out, like save it as a PDF or even as like a JPEG, high quality JPEG, and see how it looks just to test back and forth on your sheet size. It all depends on the sheet size and the scale. The only thing that I really made gray here was the inside of this block for the window frame, but then the block outline is just this thick black line, right? Like for example, this is a 1 point, but then this is a 2.5 point. You see, because this is closer together. All right, so this is important to keep in mind. Even this, I should make this even a little bit lighter. This is 2. This should honestly be like a 1, you know? So it'll give you some hierarchy. I should honestly add a hatch in here compared to the hatch that I have in here, but it's okay. But yeah, this is one thing to keep in mind is that everything here is a black color except, maybe just this, because like so much going on the window frame. That's that. And again, there's hierarchy with what's surface and what's cut. So obviously anything that's cut or hatch is not going to be dark. Anything that's surface is going to be lighter, but then anything cut is going to be darker. I could make this just a little bit lighter, or a little bit darker, but we'll see how it looks. But yeah, see, this looks fantastic, And so I want to show you 2 more things. I want to show you how I'm going to hatch the grounds, right? I'm going to show you how to make your custom hatch. I covered in my previous video, but if people are watching this for the first time, how I can make a custom hatch. And I want to show you something. Like, for example, I don't like how big the dots look here. The dimension style. I should have made them a little bit smaller in the scale factor when I did it in Rhino, when I did my annotation style. But this is a pretty easy fix. If you select like the group selection tool, right? And I can select this, or you can just turn all your layers off and I can do select same appearance, right? It's going to select all the dots for me, you see? And if I go to object, transform each, I can scale these individually. So like maybe I want them a little bit smaller and I can preview it. Maybe like we can do 80 just to see how it looks. Let me turn the preview off. Maybe even smaller than that, like maybe 75. I don't know, we're gonna see how it looks. And now let's do okay. Yeah, see, that feels nicer. That feels nicer. It doesn't feel as large in your face. And the same thing with the text. The text is a little too big. I can do, select same text objects. If I can do select same or object text objects. See, that's why you want to do the legacy text, because then I can edit it. I can change the size of these. Maybe instead of 30 point, it's like, I don't know, 25. Yeah. That reads a little bit nicer, you see? It's a little bit more proportional to the drawing. So you have to keep these things in mind, because all these things matter. So now the next thing I want to do is a hatch, okay? So I'm going to save this file before I hatch it. And I want to do the Pathfinder option. I'm going to show you something with the Pathfinder. So if I select all of these and I go to my Pathfinder, which is over here, and then I go to options, I can do Pathfinder options. I can simplify or remove redundant points and do okay. And that's going to simplify it a little bit more, And so if you don't have Pathfinder, just go to Window and find Pathfinder, Now, I have a couple options here. I can hatch everything at once. I'm just worried it might crash the file. Or I can hatch things individually. We'll just try to hatch everything at once. And I'll show you how to do custom hatches. But let me just move this to the side right here because I don't need that right now. And I'm going to turn off my hatches, actually. So if I go to my layer, I'm going to turn off my hatch because I don't want that. But actually, let me take this page border, put it on a new layer because I want that. Do Control F to paste in the same spot. Let me turn off my hatch, and then I'm going to turn off my dims. I don't need dims. And I'm going to take this, right, and I'm going to duplicate it. Maybe down here. I'm just holding Alt. Oh God, I want to go off the artboard. You got to be careful. Like that. All right. And then I'm going to do Object Live Paint. So I'm going to select this whole thing. And I'm just going to do K. And I'm just going to click here. Yeah, this is tell you have a lot of points. And let's just see how long it takes. Okay, it didn't take that long. It took maybe 10 seconds, but I fast forwarded through it. Let me just click out of here. I'm going to make a new layer. I'm going to call it Hatch. Okay. So if I press K, you see I can live paint around this, which is fantastic. I can even live paint. Might change the wood hatch. This is what I really want to live paint around here. You see? All right, fantastic. So to do custom hatches in Illustrator, they call them swatches, right? So you can go over here and do the swatches panel, and you can literally take these. You can take anything. You can take an image if you wanted to. You can take even a path that you draw, like any path that you draw in Illustrator, you can turn it into a swatch and it will be a hatch for you. It's just that it might not be perfectly seamless, but honestly, it doesn't even matter if you're going to work at very large scales because the patterns will be really large. So I'll give you an example. So like for example, this one right here, if I select it and do like Control G and group it, if I drag it in here, so now that's become a swatch. So if I have like a square or something, you see, it'll become an actual hatch. It might not be perfectly seamless, and I'll show you how you can edit it. So like if you do something really big, I mean this isn't bad to be honest, but maybe this one might not be perfectly seamless. So let me just group it and drag it. So let's just try this hatch here. If I go and we click on this one here. I mean, this isn't bad, but let me show you how you can edit the swatch, right? So let's say it's not that seamless. Let me make just a really big one and see how it looks. I mean, it's okay. It's actually not bad. So if I edit this, right, you can actually edit swatch to make it more seamless. You can double click on here, right, and you'll get this pattern. So like, let's say for example, like this was off, right? Like you can, this was off. Let's say it was like this, right? You can move it so like it kind of stitches closer together, right? Let's say that you can stitch this closer together if you wanted to, and it'll start to, and then you can start to connect your swatches, right? So like like you see how like there's maybe like a gap here, right? So I can go in here, maybe just go in like that, right, and go in right here like that, and then yeah, you see, and then you can even shift like 2.25. I can shift it horizontally if I wanted to, like maybe the width of the swatch is not that big, maybe it's like 2.2 instead. You see how things shift over, right? So you can shift things over if it's not lining up perfectly, or you can even change the grid, how it tiles, like a brick, or a grid, or brick by column versus brick by row. So it's really up to you how you want to make things seamless. If it doesn't look that seamless to you, all right. So I'm gonna press, but once you do that, you just press done. I'm gonna press cancel because I like how it is, but you just press done and it'll save it for you, right? So you have that. All right. So that's how you basically do custom hatches. And again, you can bring in like a JPEG image and then embed it and then just drag it in here in the exact same process. Let me just show you that real fast as well. So right here, let's say I can bring in this concrete hatch right here. I can bring it in here and then I want to embed it, right? And I can just drag it into the swatch panel. If I click on here, you got your concrete hatch, you see? So there's a lot of ways of doing custom swatches slash hatches in Illustrator. So here I'm actually going to use the default swatches. So if you go down here, right, you go to patterns, basic graphic. I want to do textures, and I like to use the stipple fine. I like to put in there stipple irregular, sandy dry lake. I don't know how that looks. Shifting sand. I think that's really about it. No, not bird's feet. Yeah, we'll just work with that. Okay. Let me see how these look. I know the stipple irregular, so let me just. Okay, that looks great. And then let me just. I'm just holding Alt to duplicate. Yeah, this is when I like to use this for soil. Okay, great. And then this I like to use for ground. I don't really care for that. So these are the two I like to use. What's this one? No. Okay, so these are the two that I want to use. So in terms of the scale of this, I mean, this is really fine. So I'm going to just scale this up. And scale this up as well. And I want to make sure I'm on the hatches layer. Yeah, so I'm just gonna I'm gonna press I to sample, right? I'm gonna sample this, or actually let me sample this one, I to sample. And I'm gonna do K for live paint. I want to live paint around here like that. There you go. That's what I want. Oh, that looks great. Yeah. This is why I like Illustrator, because of the hatches of this. It's very therapeutic. And then here for my floor, there you go, like that. I mean, it might be a little too dense to be honest, because let me make it just a little bit bigger. Okay, just yeah. And then honestly, for the wood grain, I don't mind using that custom one we just made instead of using this one. Let me go here. Let me go to my swatches panel, and let me select this and just do K, like that. Yeah, I actually like this a lot. This looks nice as a wood grain. I might want to, let me just zoom in on this. I don't want it to be too big. I think the scale is pretty nice. Okay, so once you have that set, I'm going to expand this. Okay, so because I don't really need this anymore. So, I mean, I like to make a duplicate So I always can go back and edit the swatch, but in this case, I don't want to. And by the way, if you wanted to do hatches all in Illustrator, I can go and start like, hatching these in, hatching that in like that, right? I can start hatching all these things in if I wanted to. But I did it in Rhino just for the sake of this video. So I'm going to expand this. So I'm going to do Object, Live Paint, Expand. Okay? And then I'm going to ungroup this. And so you see now all of the hatches are together. Hatches are with its own, you see? The hatches are its own thing. And it'll still act as a hatch too, which is really nice. And I like to find like a pretty good reference. Sometimes I'll do Control Y, right? To find that like a good outline to reference. It's typically the trees I like to use. I can use the corner of the picture, but for some reason the trees are more distinct in me like finding out where it is, or even the facade, to be honest. You just shift over one. There you go. Nice. So I'm actually going to take this and okay, this should be on the hatch layer. Let me just do Control X and then Control F. And I want to move this hatch layer in the very bottom. I'm going to call it hatch new. Okay, that's really important. It's on the very bottom. And then I'll do Control Y to get an outline view. There we go. So I might make my hatch just a little bit lighter. So these two are grouped together right now. So I'm going to make it maybe like 80%, or let's do 70. Yeah, this feels good. I'm going to export and see how it looks, but turn my dimension on. I'm actually going to make it lighter, 50%, and see how it looks. And let's say I wanted to change this hatch, right? I can just select, the group selection, and I can change this hatch to like this, for example. You see? You can still sample the hatches and change it. Keep that in mind. So I'm going to save this. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to test this out and see how this looks in terms of colors, and I'll go back and show you the final, and then I'll show you the final exports into InDesign and as like a PDF and compare the Rhino version versus the Illustrator version. Okay, so I just did some minor adjustments. So for example, for this hatch here, I gave it a 40% opacity. Make sure to ungroup your hatches after you expand them. And then I made this 70% opacity, and I made it just a little bit more dense, But other than that, that's about it. And so I just have this saved as an Illustrator file, and I laid this out in InDesign. And I'm just going to show you options, or not options, but I'm going to show you the differences between the Rhino method and the Illustrator method. And you're going to see how like very close they are actually. There are just matter of preferences, I guess, of how you like your workflow to be, So I'm just going to show you my InDesign file, and then I'm going to show you the final exports from PDF. So again, on InDesign, I have it laid out. This is why I use InDesign to lay out my drawings. I have this as the original Illustrator file. So this is the Illustrator version. I know, don't worry about the quality. I have this on medium quality so that it runs faster. But I have this as the Illustrator file. I don't save my Illustrator files as a PDF. I just keep it as Illustrator and I place it in my InDesign document. It's important to understand. And then this is the PDF export from Rhino. Okay. And so I'm just going to show you different layouts. It's nice to like, as I said before, it's nice to have like technical drawings next to each other, like technical next to a rendering that shows the view of what you're looking at. It's really nice to blend like the technical with the actual creative or design intent. It shows, that you have like a breadth of knowledge of what you're working with. But I didn't center these. This is just a mistake. I should have centered this along the image. These should be centered along the image, but not a big deal. So I'm going to show you the final export of these as PDFs. And I'll show you on one side the Rhino and next side the Illustrator, okay? And then we'll just talk about minor differences. And at the end of the video, I'm going to show you, or I guess discuss maybe the building science behind this wall assembly. like the idea of like exterior insulation, and just like the different opinions people have about it. You don't have to listen to it if you're not interested in it, but I think it's important to discuss this as well. Okay, so I'm going to transition over and show the final exports as a PDF. This is like, a high quality PDF. I do press quality for my PDF. Okay, so here we are in the final exports, and I'm gonna have them labeled on the bottom right corner, whether it's the Rhino method or the Illustrator method. So if you remember this plan, this is the plan that we did in the last video. This is just, the full architectural floor plan, right? And then this is what you saw us do in the first segment of this video of doing the detail in Rhino. This is all Rhino. There's no Illustrator in this whatsoever. This is just pure straight from Rhino. So, people who say that you can't do drawings in Rhino, you can definitely do drawings in Rhino. Like this looks fantastic. I would say that I would have made the batten, the horizontal batten, a little bit darker, right? Just so that you can read that, there's a horizontal batten, not just a vertical batten. That would be my critique. I think everything else looks pretty nice, I would say. But I wish the trees, maybe the trees should have been a little bit darker, the outline, just to give it that reading of vegetation. But yeah, so this is Rhino. This was all done in Rhino, and I just laid it out in InDesign. That's all. No Illustrator whatsoever on this one. So this is the next page. So now this is the Illustrator. This is what you just saw us do in this segment of the video, right? The second half of the video. This is the Illustrator method. You see? And I'll show you side by side. But you see, you can tell the difference by the hatching. You see how the hatches are a little bit different? The ground hatch has like this pebble look to it. So now I'm going to go to the next page, which is you're going to see the Rhino on the right and Illustrator on the left. On the next page. There you go. So now this is the most important comparison, right? This is a mistake. This should have been floor plan. The plan should have been plan detail for the labels. But right here, you see, so on the right is the Rhino method, on the left is Illustrator. So it's up to you to gauge what you like which ones you like more in terms of line weights. Me, I think that Illustrator makes the lines feel a little bit more crisp. I don't know, that's just the feeling I get when I see Illustrator. But it's not like that huge of a difference, if I was going to be honest. I mean, you can let me know in the comments what you think, but I think that the way Illustrator reads hatches and lines, for some reason, is just more crisp. And if you look right here in like the ground hatch, the way it patterns the hatching is just way more organic. You see how like this just feels way more organic compared to here on the Rhino hatch of the interior floor, right? It seems more, you can read the pattern quite easily. But this patterning, it just seems way more organic. Let me zoom in. Maybe like, there you go. So you see, when I read the floor patterning here, it just seems way more organic, I can't really read the pattern. But here, I can start to read the pattern of the floor hatch. You see? So again, the left is Illustrator, the right is Rhino. It's really a matter of preference of what you like to do. I should have made the flashing a little bit darker on this one. The brake metal flashing should have been a little bit darker. But again, it's a matter of preference of what you like to read. You see, it's like, sometimes it's like, what am I looking at? Like, what's the difference, But I just think that the lines are a little bit more crisp on Illustrator. That's just my opinion, though. So again, let me know in the comments what you think reads better. So again, this is Illustrator, this is Rhino. Let me just zoom out. There you go. So Rhino's on the right, Illustrator's on the left. All right, next one. This is just me doing like a color overlay. Sometimes I like to do color overlays on my drawings. Again, this is just a layout, like I was saying, of having like nice technical with the creative intent next to it. I think it reads nicer, Like they'll get it right away. This is the Rhino. Again, look at the bottom right. This will tell you what it is. This is Rhino. This is the Illustrator. Rhino, Illustrator. Same, just look at the corner condition, So what we could have done is when we did this plan on Illustrator, we could have taken it and just scaled it up by 100 or 200%. Like we could have scaled up like 300% to get this. That's the nice thing about Illustrator. So let's say you worked on a floor plan and you made it very detailed on Illustrator. Instead of redoing all of the line weights again, you can just go and scale everything up and make sure that when you scale things up, you have scale, stroke, and effects as well. And then you might have to readjust some of the line weights. But that's the biggest pro of Illustrator, is that you don't have to do the work twice. We could have just taken this, right, in a separate file, made a clipping mask out of this, and just scaled it up. But I just wanted to show the entire method. Whereas in Rhino, like you're gonna have to redo the line weights, right? If you did it strictly in Rhino. So that's just one thing to realize, that that's the nicer thing about the Illustrator method. But the con is that you're using a secondary program. So that's the con. Whereas Rhino, you just stick to Rhino, and once you print a PDF, you can lay it out in InDesign and you're done. This is a colored version of the plan. It's kind of like this like tealish blue, depending on the color profile you use, like CMYK versus RGB. But I think these look beautiful as well when you add color to it. Maybe sometimes you just want to do the section cut has a color, everything else is gray, or you want to give everything a color. So in this example, I give everything a color, and there's basically two methods to this. But before I show you, let me just zoom in and show you how really, like it looks beautiful with the color as well. I think it makes it a little bit more thought provoking, it was more intentional. Like it makes you seem a little bit more confident in your design intent. This is just really nice when you add certain types of colors, because it shows that you have a very specific focus of presentation style, that you know what you're doing, and gives the feeling that you have a lot of control over your presentation style when you start to show things like this in color. You just have to be careful what color you use, because some colors can get a little too distracting, but there are certain colors that work well. I think colors that are a little bit on the darker side, a little bit on the earthy side, a little bit on the neutral help. So like blues, dark reds. Yeah, I would say blue, like dark blues and dark reds work really well, in my opinion. And so again, like I said, there's two ways of doing this. One way is on Illustrator, which is very straightforward, or in Rhino, where you just pick your certain colors, right? That's one way. So let me just go to Illustrator real fast. So on Illustrator, right, you see this here, I just literally changed all of my stroke colors to this color here. That's one way. The only con side is that your actual hatches will not have that color. So that's the only like contrasting element you'll have. So that's one method, right? But it still looks fine, looks great. I mean, the hash is not having that color might be a con for some people. The other method is if you use Photoshop. And it's very easy on Photoshop. I'll show you. It's super easy on Photoshop. You can even open your Illustrator file on Photoshop if you wanted to. So if I go to Photoshop real fast, so here I am in Photoshop. All I'm doing is I literally opened my Illustrator file in Photoshop at the same resolution, 300 dpi, and I just gave it a selective color profile. And all you're going to change in your selective color profile are your neutrals and your black. That's it. So the black and neutral are the only ones you're going to change, and you want to make sure you match the values. So you see here, I have my cyan and magenta at 100, my yellow at a negative 100. That gives me like this like bluish tone. And then the same thing for my neutrals. You see? But you want to change it at the same time. So for example, if I make this like negative, I don't know, like go here. Right? I got to do the same thing for my black as well. You see, then it will change the hue completely. Then it becomes like this like light cyan, which I don't recommend because it becomes too light. So I like to do, again, like dark blues, dark reds when it comes to these plans when I use color. But that's how you change the color, and it's really helpful. And then if you do it in Photoshop, you can just save it as a PNG because PNG is lossless. So if you do like Control Shift Alt S, and you might get this dialog if the file is massive. Like for mine, it's 300 dpi at a 24 by 36, so it's a really big file. It's like 200 megabytes. But I can save it as a PNG, for example, and I'll do it as a PNG 24, which is important because it has more color depth. And then it's really up to you if you want to save it with a transparency or not. Sometimes it can add sometimes it makes the file larger. So it's just really up to you. But if you do through Photoshop, I would just save it as a PNG and then a very high quality PNG. So the exact same format as it is. And so like this one's like 7 megabytes. It's not that bad. You can look down here. It's around like 7 megabytes, which isn't that bad to be honest. and then you can just put it back in your InDesign file. Obviously, in Illustrator, it'll just stay as an Illustrator file, and you can drop that back into your InDesign file. So it's just a matter of preference. You know, it's totally okay if you flatten your images as long as it's a very high DPI. I do that actually more times than not. I actually flatten a lot of my images, and I make them PNGs or even very high quality JPEGs instead of PDFs, because it just makes all the line weights exactly like how I want it to appear. But yeah, so let me just quickly go back to that original PDF. All right, I'm going to transition over to the 3D model of this file, and I want to just talk about the building science of this project, of the wall assembly, okay? So, you know, if you look at this section, again, I'm going to just talk about the section right here, right? What's basically happening in the wall section detail is that you have the exterior element, which is the facade, right? Actually, let me go to the rendering because it's probably better to read. Let me do the corner. There we go. And let me take out this guy. So, you know, we're basically looking at this corner condition, right? Which is, you know, this corner condition. And what's happening here is, you know, you have like this wood slat facade, right? You have the wood slat facade here, okay? That's the first thing. And then, you know, you're going to have a little horizontal batten, and I'll go to the 3D model, but I just want you to relate it to the image, right? You're going to have the horizontal button with the vertical batten. So that's like basically your vented rain screen. That's where you can allow air to circulate through there. And then you're going to have your exterior rigid insulation, right? This is your permanent insulation, and then your membrane, your air barrier, or excuse me, it's like your air barrier, vapor barrier, but that terminology can get very confusing for people. So I'll just call it the weather barrier or the weather membrane. And then your sheathing, and then your framing, and your interior finish. And so I'm going to transition over to my 3D model so you can see it a little better. And I'll just talk about some of people's approaches to this. Okay, so here we are in the 3D model. And so this is literally where we got our actual detail from. But if you see here, right, this is going to be like an air gap in between here. This is where air can actually circulate. And it's like a secondary drainage plane if you ever need water to leave. But in general, there's like, I guess, a larger trend towards doing a more substantial amount of exterior insulation with a rain screen. The more, I guess, controversial topic, or maybe the topic where you find differing opinions, depending who you talk to, whether you talk to a building scientist versus a builder versus a product representative. So is the application of the exterior insulation, right? The location of your weather barrier, and how you identify your drainage plane and like condensation point, okay? So just to break this down. So like I said, there's more of a trend to doing exterior insulation as like the primary insulation of your structure. And some people will still have cavity insulation. I'll get to that point. But the main idea is that you have a rain screen with exterior insulation, membrane, drainage plane, framing, interior finish. That's like the main assembly system. And you can do that for your roof. And the most important element is like, you know, how do you block air and how do you allow moisture to leave the building or leave the structure? So you want to block moisture from getting in. And if moisture comes into your building, how can you allow moisture to leave? Okay, so this becomes, I guess, more controversial when you're talking about which region you're going to apply this type of assembly to. Because, you know, you have major climatic regions like moderate, hot, dry, hot, humid, cold, subarctic, tropical, right? And so these all have like different applications of how you apply rigid insulation. Now, when it comes to like the condensation point, right, typically, you know, you're going to have your outside and your inside, right? So if the outside, for example, is really humid and the inside is really cold, it's going to condense inside, like in thermodynamics when it's a heat transfer between hot to cold, not cold to hot. So when heat is traveling through here, right, you're going to have a condensation point. And some people say as long as you're providing ample insulation, ample exterior insulation, depending on the climatic region, then you don't have to worry about the interior insulation, and you can keep your drainage plane and your vapor permeability with this drainage plane here, okay? And so you can apply this idea for all climatic regions, but you just need to vary your exterior insulation. And you would also vary the permeability of your barrier. Because there are vapor barriers that are permeable, semi-permeable, impermeable. So depending on the climatic regions, you need to know two things, right? You need to know how much insulation you need if you're going to do it for purely exterior, and you need to know the level of permeability that you need for your barriers. Obviously, for your air barriers, you want to not let air in, but that's just two important factors to understand. Now, some people will critique this and they'll say that if you don't put in cavity insulation, right? If you don't put in cavity insulation, the difference of temperature is going to be too drastic that it's going to create a lot of condensation. And this typically applies to like extreme areas, right? Like areas that are like very hot or very humid or very cold. So like, desert climate that's like 120 degrees, or a very humid, hot, humid climate with like humidity of 70+%, and it's like just incredibly hot as well. Typically what's going to happen is you're going to have like extreme weather conditions on the outside, and the interior is going to be a huge temperature difference. So let's take, for example, like you're in a tropical climate where it's very hot and humid outside, and inside you have your air conditioner on. That means at this point here, see, the temperature is going to be maybe, let's say, like, maybe like 45 degrees Celsius, or, which is really hot. It's like 100 plus, whatever. And the inside, it's like maybe 71 degrees Fahrenheit, right? Or like, maybe 20 degrees Celsius or something like that, or 25 to cool off the area, right? Because the temperature difference is so much, right? Going from, especially from this rigid insulation, they're saying that at this point here, it's going to condense a lot because you don't have enough, you don't have any cavity insulation to kind of like taper down that change of temperature. So that's why some people say you need to put in some, cavity insulation so that the change of temperature, right? So let's say this is high and this is low, right? It's not like this, like if you're going to graph it out, right? We'll say this is very high, right? This is like the temperature difference. And we'll say like this is like the dew point right here, right? And this doesn't make sense, but you get what I mean. So if you don't have the bad insulation or some cavity insulation, they're saying that this is going to be a huge, drastic change of temperature between here and here. So it's going to condense a lot. Other people are saying no. If you provide ample insulation here, it's going to slow down the temperature difference where all the condensation will happen here and you'll be fine. If you look at product representatives and their details for recommended insulation, a lot of them will recommend both, because the product rep is more so worried about the longevity and the warranty of the product than other factors like thermal comfort or sound, for example. Because someone else might say, actually, you can install this insulation for like sound attenuation to block sound out, So, or not to block, just to mitigate sound. But that's just something that's really important to understand, because if you're going to start detailing a lot of wall sections, you're going to confront this a lot in the professional world about where you place your exterior insulation, the permeability of your air barrier. But in general, the typical assembly is rain screen, right, which is basically like your facade and your battens with an airspace. Your exterior insulation, whether you want it to be, exterior rigid insulation or rock wool, your membrane, and your sheathing, and then your interior framing. If you did not have exterior insulation, then your location of your vapor profile might change depending on your wall construction. So if you had zero exterior rigid insulation, right, and you're in a cold climate or hot climate, most likely your vapor profile is gonna change to the interior face because that's where most of the change of temperature is gonna happen. So that's just, an important thing to understand is that your location, like your region you're in, how you're placing your exterior insulation, even if you have exterior insulation, and your condensation points. Those things are very important. And when you talk to your MEP, like your MEP consultants, if you're in an architectural office, you'll have an MEP consultants. You'll talk to them about this because it's very important, especially in the U.S. and obviously in other places like in Europe where they really care about sustainability and building envelopes. It's a major discussion point. And honestly, if you look at building science websites versus product rep websites, sometimes they're in agreement and sometimes they're in a disagreement. Everyone has these different opinions about how to do this. But it's a very important topic, and I'm going to talk more about this when I start showing sections too. I'm gonna do videos about sections as well. So I hope you found this helpful. I'm going to make a video about sections and wall sections next, and I'll talk about the building science approach to it as well. I'll go through it again. So yeah, I mean, I really hope you found this helpful. I mean, this is like a great way of like justifying because there's some people that are like, oh, just do it in Rhino. I'm like, no, it doesn't look nice in Rhino. I want to do it in Illustrator, and vice versa. So hopefully this is giving you a good impression that you know what, you can like produce pretty drawings, beautiful drawings. Doesn't matter what program you use. You just need to understand the ideas of like hierarchy and line weight and stuff like that. That's all. But yeah, if you found this video helpful, please like and subscribe because I really want to help this channel grow. All right, thank you.